Okay, I'm going to demonstrate using Visual Basic and getting started with Visual Basic. This will be the first lesson. So to get started, you launch Visual Basic and select a new project. This brings up the Visual Basic editor, and we're going to make a Windows application, and I press OK. The first thing you're going to see here is the form. The form is located in the middle, and that basically you can think of as like the canvas of your work. That's where you put everything on there. Over here to the left is a toolbox. I've got properties and Solution Explorer. If any of those windows are not displayed, I can view those by selecting View, Other Windows, and select the one that's not there. For example, if the Solution Explorer is not visible, I can go View, Other Windows, and by selecting the Solution Explorer, it's going to appear here again. You'll see the form is called form1.vb, and that's form1.vb. The next thing I want to do is I want to add a tool to it. So I'm going to add, for my first program here, a label. And the label tool is right here. If I double click on it, it's going to place a label here. I'm going to press play and show you my program I just made. And when I press play, this is the Windows application running. Just like any other Windows application, pretty well. You've got minimize, maximize, and if I want to close it off, it says close. And of course, the label is appearing because I put one on there. Okay, let's modify this a little bit. So the first thing I did is I put a label here, but the label really, I want to give the label a name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll up in my properties, and I know the label is selected because I can see the highlight dots around it. And I'm going to select the name of the label, and I'm going to call it LBL, and use the lower three case letters LBL. Anytime we name things in Visual Basic, you're not allowed to put spaces. So if I want to use multiple words, I can't use spaces. The other thing is, because there's so many different things we're naming, I like to use three lowercase letters to tell me what that item is. Just so in programming, when I'm accessing it later on, it makes things easier. So although it seems like a little bit of a waste of time, really try to follow the standard, and it will make your programming easier. So I'm going to name this LBL capital D display. And when I press enter, nothing is different. Well, almost nothing is different. The only different thing is if I click on this, it now says LBL display is system.windows.forms.label. And it says name is LBL display. Okay, what students usually want to do with a label is change the text that's appearing on the screen. So for this label, I'm going to change the text to say, hello world. And we're going to make the Hello World program. When I press enter, the text of course changes. There's other properties you might want to modify. For example, the font is one. And with font, there's multiple things. So when I click on font, the ellipsis, the three little dots here appear, and I can click on that, and I can choose a different font. I can choose maybe Comic Sans. I have students that used to love Comic Sans. Get all excited with that. So I'll click on Comic Sans. I might make it bold, and I might make it a 14 size font. And now it says Hello World. Okay, I'm going to make a command button. And for the button, I'm going to go to the name property. The first thing I do is I'm going to call it BTN exit. And the text on it, I'll go down to the text property and change the text that is on the button to say quit. Great, so now I've got a button to quit. Now I really wouldn't need it because I can always click on the X, but there you go. I've now programmed that. And so when I press play, it would look just like you think it would look. It says hello world, and the quit button I can click. Now when I click it, it doesn't do anything. That's because I haven't told it to do anything. So let's add some code to get it to do stuff. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to double click on the quit button, and it brings me now to the code view. And in the code view, you'll see it says BTN exit, and that's because I named the button BTN exit. And it has the event here of clicking. Also, the code is generated, private sub BTN exit click. In other words, when I click button exit. So between private sub and end sub, all the codes will be executed when I click button exit. Well, what codes do I want to put in? The code to stop is called end, E-N-D. I purposely type it in lowercase. The reason I type it in lowercase is because when I press enter, it self-corrects, and I know that I put the right word in because I see it as a capital, and I know it should be self-corrected. So quite often I'll put things in lowercase as I type my codes, and I watch the computer fix things out. The other thing you can do to add codes is if I was typing END, if I press the space bar, it will also put what was highlighted. So for example, I'll do it again, EN, and notice end is highlighted. The key I'm pressing is not the D key. Even though it's going to appear like I'm pressing the D key, I'm actually just going to press the space key. When I press the space bar, end would be selected. I'm going to press play, and there's my hello world. When I press quit, it's going to end, and it did. Let me go back to the design view. I'm going to add some other things on here. The last thing I want to do is I showed you IntelliSense with correcting, is I want to talk about assignment statements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some radio buttons on here, and I go to the toolbar, and in the radio buttons, I'm going to put two radio buttons. And later on, I'll get you to put 3. The first radio button, I'm going to call Rad English. And the text, I'm going to go to text here, and I'm going to say English. The next radio button, I'm going to call French, Rad French, and so I go to the top name property, and I call it Rad French. Now I'm going to put some codes for the radio buttons. So for example, if I click on Rad English, when I click on Rad English, so not check changed, but click. So on Rad English, or check change would work fine too. So for that event, what I can do is I can say LBL, I can say me, that's the program I'm running, and then the LBL, the object is LBL display, that's the label, and the property is called the text property. So I go me, and when I press dot, I can select the object, and then dot, I can select the property, and then I can use an assignment statement. The assignment statement is equals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell me.labeldisplay.text. So the text in label display of me form is going to equal, and in quotation marks, I'm going to say hello world with an exclamation mark. Let me show you again for the French, and then that will be it for today's little mini lesson. So for Rad French, if I click on Rad French, how would I change the label display's text? Well, what I would do is I'd say me.labeldisplay.text is equal to what is French, and French for hello world would be bonjour. My French is not so good. L'amant. And did I spell it right? I'm not sure. But hopefully that is correct. And what is going to happen now is when I press play, you can see the codes. I've got English. If I select French, it displays French. If I click on English, it displays English. And when I press quit, it quits. One last thing I want to show you that's super important is the very first time you make a project, you need to save it. So what you need to do is a lot of people will hit save, and you're going to be in trouble if that's what you do. It's unfortunate that Visual Basic doesn't have a better method of doing this, and I constantly see students that mess up on this. So watch this last thing, and it's very important. When you go to save, every program you make, you need to start by going Save All. And that's going to save everything. And then it's going to say, oh, what do you want to call it? Give it a name. So I'm going to call this Hello World International. And then it's got a check mark to create a directory for the solution. Yes, that's what I want. And it's going to save it where? In your Drive H, in your documents, in a folder called Visual Studio 2010, in a folder called Projects. Yikes, that's a mouthful. But that's what it does, and that will be just fine. So I press Save, and there, everything's saved. Now from this point forward, you can click the Save All on here, and it'll work just fine, and everything will be saved. The next day where you go to find it is Drive H. So let me just show you again. If I go to Drive H, My Documents, it's made a folder called Visual Basic 2010. It also made another folder in there called Projects, and you'll see it made a folder called Hello World International, and finally inside Hello World International see a whole slew of things. It made tons of stuff. Microsoft likes to make lots of stuff for you. So it's got all sorts of folders. Feel free to go through it, but the one you really want is this file called Hello World International. I double click on it. It's going to bring this up. It says, oh, don't trust it. You know, just be careful. Well, I made it myself. Yeah, I trust it. And you'll see everything is here. The toolbox, I can display the toolbox. The form, oops, the toolbox back. I've got my toolbox. I've got my form. Let me resize this. It does. Toolbox, my form, my projects, properties, everything's good. Okay.